Welcome back to the English Hour. Today, I'm joined by Jacob, and we're going to dive into some fascinating ways to improve your English speaking skills naturally. How are you doing today, Jacob?
I'm doing great, Sophia. Really excited to talk about this because speaking English confidently can be challenging for many learners.
Absolutely. Let's start with one of the most important habits, practicing regularly. How do you suggest people keep consistent practice in their busy lives?
That's a good question. I always recommend setting small daily goals, like speaking for 5 minutes about your day or describing something around you in English.
I love that idea. Even small talk can help a lot. What about the fear of making mistakes? Many learners hesitate to speak because they worry about errors.
That's very common. I tell learners to embrace mistakes as part of learning. The more you speak, the more you improve. Don't be afraid to sound imperfect.
Great advice. Another tip I often share is to practice speaking out loud, even if you're alone. Reading books or articles aloud can build fluency and confidence.
Yes, and recording yourself is super helpful too. Listening back shows you where you can improve your pronunciation or grammar.
Speaking of pronunciation, what are some easy ways learners can improve their accent and clarity?
One effective method is shadowing. It means listening to a native speaker and repeating immediately after them, trying to match their tone and rhythm.
Shadowing sounds like fun. Do you have any favorite resources for that?
Definitely. Podcasts, YouTube videos, and even audiobooks work well. Choose something you enjoy so it doesn't feel like a chore.
Enjoyment is key. Now, let's talk about vocabulary. How can learners expand their vocabulary without feeling overwhelmed?
I suggest focusing on words you actually need for daily life. Use flashcards, apps, or write new words in a journal and try to use them in sentences.
Using new words in conversation really helps them stick. And it's okay to start with simple words and build up gradually.
Absolutely. Also, learning phrases or chunks of language instead of isolated words makes speaking more natural.
That's a great point. Phrases like, "How's it going?" or "What do you think about?" can help in real conversations.
Exactly. And practicing questions is important too because it encourages dialogue rather than one-sided talking.
Yes, asking questions keeps conversations flowing. What about listening skills? How can learners improve their understanding?
Listening regularly is crucial. Start with slow and clear audio, then gradually challenge yourself with faster speech or different accents.
I find watching movies or shows with subtitles in English can help with that transition.
For sure. Subtitles support understanding and help connect spoken and written forms.
Another tip is to repeat listening to the same audio multiple times. The first time for general meaning, the next for details.
And don't worry if you don't understand everything at once. It's a gradual process.
Speaking of gradual progress, how can learners stay motivated during the ups and downs of language learning?
Setting clear, achievable goals helps. Celebrate small wins, like successfully ordering food or chatting with a stranger.
Also, tracking progress with journals or apps shows how far you've come, which boosts confidence.
Joining a study group or language exchange can make learning social and fun.
Social learning adds accountability and real practice opportunities.
Technology makes it easier too. There are apps for chatting with native speakers or language games.
Technology is a big help. Now, let's switch gears. What's your advice for learners who want to improve their English writing skills alongside speaking?
Writing every day, even short paragraphs or diary entries, is very effective.
And reading a lot helps with writing because you see how sentences are structured.
Using online tools to check grammar and vocabulary is a good practice too.
Feedback is key. Sharing your writing with friends or teachers helps you improve faster.
True. Writing and speaking support each other, so balancing both is ideal.
Definitely. Now, let's discuss how to handle real life situations like ordering food, asking for directions, or making small talk in English.
Practicing these common scenarios prepares you for actual conversations. Role playing with a partner can build confidence.
Yes, for example, saying, "Could I have the menu, please?" Or, "Where is the nearest bus stop?" are very practical phrases.
Also, learning polite expressions like excuse me and thank you makes interaction smoother.
Politeness and good manners always help when communicating in any language.
For small talk, topics like the weather, hobbies, or local events are great starters.
Small talk can sometimes feel awkward, but practicing questions like, "What do you like to do in your free time?" makes it easier.
Exactly, and listening carefully to responses helps keep the conversation going.
What about cultural differences? How can learners be respectful when speaking English in different countries?
Researching customs beforehand is important. For instance, some cultures value directness, while others prefer indirect communication.
Observing body language and tone can also give clues on how to respond appropriately.
And when in doubt, it's always good to ask politely or use neutral language.
That's excellent advice. Finally, Jacob, what is your number one tip for anyone struggling with English fluency?
My number one tip is to never stop speaking. Find every opportunity to use English, no matter how small. The key is consistency and courage.
That's inspiring. Keep speaking, keep learning, and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Exactly. The journey of learning English is a marathon, not a sprint.
I couldn't agree more. Thanks for sharing such valuable tips, Jacob.
My pleasure, Sophia. I hope our listeners feel encouraged to practice every day.
And that wraps up our deep dive into natural ways to improve English speaking. Stay tuned for more episodes on the English Hour.
One thing I also want to add is the importance of surrounding yourself with English as much as possible. The more you hear it daily, the more natural it becomes.
Yes, immersion is a powerful tool. Even if you can't travel, creating an English environment at home through music, movies, and conversations can help a lot.
Definitely. I remember when I first started, I would label objects around the house with their English names to keep vocabulary fresh in my mind.
That's a clever idea. Visual reminders help the brain retain new words and connect them to everyday objects.
Another useful habit is thinking in English rather than translating from your native language. It takes practice but makes speaking faster and more natural.
I agree. When learners stop translating word for word, their sentences flow better and sound more natural.
It also reduces hesitation because you're not stuck trying to find equivalent words.
How do you suggest learners practice thinking in English?
Start by narrating your day silently in English or describing your surroundings mentally. Over time, try to do it out loud.
That's a great exercise. Also, journaling your thoughts in English every day can help train your mind to express ideas directly.
Absolutely. And don't worry about grammar perfection at first. Focus on communicating your message.
Speaking of communication, body language plays a huge role in making your message clear. What tips do you have for learners about that?
Use natural gestures and facial expressions to support your words. Smiling, nodding, and eye contact can make conversations more engaging.
And don't forget that some gestures might have different meanings in different cultures. So be mindful.
Right? Observing others and asking questions can prevent misunderstandings.
Let's touch on slang and informal expressions. How important is it for learners to know these?
It depends on their goals. For casual conversations and understanding movies or music, slang is useful.
But it's best to learn slang gradually and in context, so you don't misuse expressions.
Exactly. Start with common phrases like, "What's up?" or "No worries," and see how native speakers use them.
And always be cautious with slang that might be offensive or too informal for certain situations.
Good point. Formal and professional English is a different skill set but equally important.
How do you recommend learners improve formal English? Like for work or studies?
Reading academic articles, business emails, and practicing formal writing can help.
Watching news channels or educational programs also exposes learners to formal language styles.
And role-playing job interviews or presentations can build confidence for professional settings.
That's useful. Switching gears a bit, how do you keep your English fresh and avoid plateauing?
Challenging yourself is key. Try new topics, complex grammar structures, or engaging in debates and discussions.
Joining clubs or online forums where you discuss hobbies in English can also spark interest.
Yes, combining passion with learning keeps motivation high.
What about using technology? Any apps or websites you recommend?
There are many. Language exchange apps like Tandem or HelloTalk are great for chatting with native speakers.
Also, apps like Duolingo, Memrise, and Anki for vocabulary practice work well.
Don't forget YouTube channels and podcasts for listening practice tailored to learners.
We could share a list of favorites with our listeners later.
Absolutely. And something I personally like is watching videos with subtitles first in English, then without them.
That's a good strategy to improve both listening and reading skills simultaneously.
Lastly, I'd say don't be discouraged by setbacks. Learning a language has ups and downs, but persistence pays off.
Thank you so much, Jacob, for sharing these insights and practical tips with us today.
My pleasure, Sophia. I hope everyone listening feels inspired to keep pushing forward in their English journey.
And to our listeners, keep practicing, stay curious, and remember, English is a tool that opens many doors.
That's right. Keep exploring and enjoying the process.
We'll be back soon with another exciting episode. Until then, happy learning.
Before we wrap up completely, Sophia, I want to mention something about cultural understanding. Learning English is not just about language, but also about understanding different cultures.
That's an excellent point, Jacob. Language and culture go hand in hand, and knowing cultural nuances can make communication more effective and meaningful.
Exactly. For example, how people greet each other or use humor can be very different across English-speaking countries.
Yes, and being aware of those differences helps avoid misunderstandings and builds better relationships.
I always tell learners to watch TV shows or movies from different English-speaking countries to get a feel for those cultural variations.
That's a wonderful tip. It also makes learning more fun and engaging.
Absolutely. And sometimes language learning can be a way to travel virtually and experience new worlds.
Virtual travel through language, what a beautiful way to put it.
Thank you, Sophia. And I'd also like to encourage listeners to celebrate their progress, no matter how small.
Yes, every new word learned, every conversation attempted, is a step forward.
And sharing your learning journey with others can motivate you and those around you.
Thank you so much, Jacob, for joining me today and sharing your wisdom with all of us.
Thank you for having me, Sophia. It's been a pleasure.
And to everyone listening, keep practicing, stay patient, and enjoy the journey. We'll catch you in the next episode.
Looking forward to it. Take care, everyone.
Jacob, before we dive deeper, I'd love to hear about any funny or unexpected experiences you had while learning English. Sometimes those stories really help people connect and feel motivated.
Oh, definitely one time I was in a cafe and I wanted to ask for a to-go cup, but I accidentally said go to cup. The barista looked confused, and I just laughed it off. It was a small mistake, but a big learning moment.
That's hilarious. Those moments can be embarrassing but also so valuable. They remind us not to be afraid of making mistakes.
Exactly. And sometimes native speakers find it funny too, and are happy to help.
Do you have any tips on how learners can overcome fear of speaking, especially in public or with native speakers?
Yes, the key is to start small. Practice with friends or language partners who are patient and encouraging. And remember, nobody expects perfection.
Right. Also, focusing on the message you want to convey rather than perfect grammar can ease anxiety.
I like that communication over perfection. And practicing regularly, even if it's just talking to yourself, builds confidence.
What about pronunciation? Many learners struggle with it. How can they improve?
Listening is crucial. Mimic native speakers by watching videos or listening to podcasts. Repeat phrases until the sounds feel natural.
Tongue twisters can be fun practice tools too.
Absolutely, they help with articulation and muscle memory in the mouth.
Can you share a favorite tongue twister?
Sure, how about she sells seashells by the seashore? It's a classic and tricky.
That one's a classic indeed. Listeners, try saying that 5 times fast.
Haha. Yes, and don't worry if it's difficult at first, that means it's working.
Besides tongue twisters, what else can learners do to sound more natural?
Pay attention to intonation and stress. English has a musical rhythm, and practicing it helps you sound more fluent.
That's true. Stressing the right syllables and using natural pauses make your speech clearer and more engaging.
Recording yourself and listening back can help catch mistakes you might not notice in real time.
Great tip, technology makes self-review easier than ever.
And don't forget the power of storytelling. Sharing stories in English is a fun way to practice and connect with others.
I love storytelling. It's also a great way to practice different tenses, vocabulary, and expressions.
Speaking of vocabulary, how do you suggest learners keep track of new words?
I recommend keeping a dedicated notebook or digital app to jot down new words, phrases, and example sentences.
Yes, and revisiting them regularly to reinforce memory.
Flashcards work well, especially spaced repetition systems that remind you to review just before you forget.
Exactly. Consistency over time beats cramming any day.
What about idioms and phrasal verbs? They often confuse learners but are everywhere in English.
True, idioms and phrasal verbs add color and life to language, but they're tricky.
I find learning them in context, like through stories or dialogues, makes them easier to understand.
And practicing using them in your own sentences helps internalize their meanings.
Can you give an example of a useful phrasal verb and how you'd explain it?
Sure, take, break down. It can mean a car stops working or someone starts crying.
That shows how context matters a lot in English.
Exactly. It can be confusing but also fun once you get the hang of it.
Listeners, don't get discouraged if it takes time. Keep exploring and asking questions.
Absolutely. And if you can, try to use new expressions in your daily conversations.
That's the best way to make them stick.
Before we move on, Sophia, what are some common mistakes you see learners make?
One big one is overusing simple present tense, when past or future would be more appropriate.
Yes, tense accuracy can be challenging but is important for clarity.
Another is incorrect word order, especially in questions.
True. Regular practice with sentence structures and lots of listening helps correct that.
Also, forgetting to use articles like or, the, can change meanings.
English articles are tricky, especially for speakers of languages that don't use them.
Right. Patience and lots of reading can help learners develop a feel for correct usage.
And asking for feedback from native speakers or teachers is invaluable.
Exactly. Constructive feedback guides you in the right direction.
What are your thoughts on learning English through songs?
I love that method. Songs help with pronunciation, rhythm, and vocabulary.
Plus, music makes learning enjoyable and memorable.
And lyrics often use everyday language, so they're practical too.
Just make sure to look up words or expressions you don't understand in songs.
Yes, and singing along is great practice.
Listeners, do you have favorite English songs? Share them with us.
That's a great way to get involved and learn together.
Another creative approach is watching English cartoons or shows for learners.
Cartoons often use clear language and visual cues, which help understanding.
They're especially good for beginners and younger learners.
And for advanced learners, watching movies or series without subtitles challenges your skills.
Yes, and if you miss something, rewind and repeat.
Repetition is key in language learning.
Speaking of repetition, practicing dialogues with a partner or tutor can build fluency.
Playing real, life situations is a fantastic way to prepare for conversations.
For example, ordering food, asking for directions, or job interviews.
And it builds confidence by simulating real scenarios.
Do you have any recommendations for online language exchange communities?
Websites like Conversation Exchange and Meetup groups are popular.
Also, social media groups where people practice languages worldwide.
Great resources for practicing speaking and making friends globally.
Lastly, I want to remind learners to enjoy the journey.
Yes, celebrate every success, no matter how small.
Learning English opens doors to new cultures, friendships, and opportunities.
We hope this conversation inspires you to keep going strong.
Absolutely. Remember, practice, patience, and positivity are your best allies.
Thank you all for joining us today. We'll be back soon with more.
Looking forward to next time. Keep practicing, everyone.
Jacob, before we go deeper, I'm curious, how do you keep yourself motivated on tough days when learning feels slow or frustrating?
That's a great question, Sophia. On those days, I remind myself why I started my goals and dreams. I also try to change my routine, like listening to a new podcast or reading an interesting article.
Changing the approach definitely helps keep things fresh. Do you ever set small rewards for yourself?
Yes, after completing a study session or mastering a difficult phrase, I treat myself to something enjoyable like a favorite snack or a short break with music.
That sounds like a smart way to build positive habits around learning.
It is. Also, connecting with other learners or joining a study group keeps me motivated.
Community support is so important. It reminds us we're not alone on this journey.
Absolutely. Plus, sharing progress and challenges with others helps keep accountability.
Speaking of challenges, what do you think is the hardest part of learning English for most people?
For many, it's mastering listening comprehension. The speed and variety of accents can be overwhelming.
I agree. Native speakers often talk fast, use slang, or mumble, which can confuse learners.
That's why gradual exposure helps. Starting with slower, clearer audio, then progressing to more natural speech.
And using subtitles can be a helpful bridge at first.
Definitely. But learners should try to rely less on subtitles over time to train their ears.
Have you tried shadowing? Listening to a sentence and repeating it immediately.
Yes, shadowing is excellent for both pronunciation and listening skills.
It also improves rhythm and intonation.
Exactly. Consistent practice with shadowing can build confidence to understand real conversations.
What about reading? How important is reading for English learners?
Reading is vital. It expands vocabulary, improves grammar understanding, and exposes learners to different writing styles.
Do you suggest any particular types of reading materials?
It depends on the learner's level and interests. For beginners, graded readers or children's books are great.
For intermediate and advanced learners, novels, news articles, or blogs work well.
Also, reading aloud combines speaking and reading practice.
That's a fantastic way to reinforce learning.
One tip is to keep a vocabulary journal when reading. Write down new words and review them regularly.
Yes, and try to use those new words in your speaking and writing.
Another method is to summarize what you read in your own words.
That helps with comprehension and expression.
Speaking of expression, how do you encourage learners to develop their own voice in English?
I encourage them to write journals, blogs, or even social media posts in English.
Expressing your thoughts in writing builds confidence and clarity.
And reading those aloud or sharing with friends creates speaking practice opportunities.
Yes. It's important to make English a part of your daily life, not just a subject to study.
Immersing yourself, even virtually, accelerates learning.
Technology offers so many tools, apps, podcasts, online courses.
But also balance screen time with real life conversations whenever possible.
That's true. Nothing replaces actual interaction.
Jacob, do you have advice for learners preparing for English exams?
Yes, focus on understanding the test format and practicing sample questions.
Time management during exams is crucial too.
And don't neglect speaking and listening sections, they're often overlooked.
Practice speaking with a tutor or language partner regularly.
And listen to English audio daily to get used to different accents and speeds.
Test preparation should be consistent but not stressful.
Exactly. Balance study with relaxation to avoid burnout.
Finally, what's your best advice for someone just starting their English learning journey?
Start with clear, achievable goals. Be patient and enjoy the process.
Celebrate every step forward.
And remember, mistakes are part of learning, not something to fear.
That's a wonderful reminder. Keep curious and stay positive.
Thanks for this deep conversation, Sophia. I hope listeners feel inspired.
Me too. Thank you, Jacob, for sharing your insights and experiences.
Thank you, Sophia. Looking forward to next time.
And to our listeners, keep practicing, stay motivated, and we'll talk again soon. Jacob, before we dive into more tips, can you share some of the most useful apps or resources you personally use for learning English?
Sure, Sophia, I use a mix of apps depending on what I want to improve. For vocabulary, I like Anki and Memrise because they use spaced repetition to help remember words better.
Spaced repetition is a game changer for memory. What about for listening practice?
For listening, I often turn to podcasts like The English We Speak from the BBC and ESL Pod. They offer natural conversations and explanations for learners.
Great picks, and for speaking practice.
For speaking, apps like HelloTalk and Tandem are awesome. They connect you with native speakers for chat or voice calls.
Those are fantastic for real conversation. Do you also watch English movies or shows?
Absolutely. Watching series with subtitles first, then without, helps me a lot.
It's fun and educational. Any YouTube channels you'd recommend for English learners?
Yes, channels like English Addict with Mr. Duncan and Speak English with Vanessa offer lessons with clear explanations and engaging content.
Perfect. Switching gears a bit, how important do you think pronunciation is for effective communication?
Pronunciation is key. Even if your grammar is perfect, poor pronunciation can cause misunderstandings.
True, but many learners get nervous about their accent.
I tell them that having an accent is normal and even cool. It shows your unique background. The goal is clarity, not perfection.
That's such an encouraging perspective. How do you practice pronunciation?
I practice with tongue twisters, mimic native speakers, and use tools like the pronunciation feature in the Merriam-Webster dictionary app.
Mimicking intonation and rhythm is so important. Do you recommend recording yourself?
Yes, recording lets you hear your mistakes and track progress.
What about grammar? How do you balance learning rules with actually using the language?
Grammar is the skeleton, but communication is the heart. Learn rules, but don't get stuck perfecting them. Speak and write as much as possible, and learn grammar through use.
That makes sense. Immersion over memorization.
Exactly. Also, using grammar apps like Grammarly helps catch mistakes in writing.
Speaking of writing, what are good ways to practice writing skills?
Keeping a daily journal, writing emails, or participating in online forums are great.
And reading others' writing helps too.
Yes, reading exposes you to different styles and vocabulary.
What about cultural understanding? How does it affect language learning?
Immensely. Language is tied to culture. Knowing cultural context helps avoid misunderstandings and makes communication richer.
Could you give an example?
Sure. For example, idioms like kick the bucket mean to die. Without cultural knowledge, that phrase could confuse learners.
So learning culture is part of language mastery.
Definitely. Watching cultural programs or talking to native speakers helps.
As we wrap up this segment, what motivates you every day to keep improving your English?
Knowing that English connects me to the world, people, knowledge, and opportunities.
That's inspiring. Let's remind our listeners that their journey is unique, but connected through language.
Well said, Sophia. It's a journey worth every effort.
Thank you, Jacob, for such a rich conversation today.
Thank you, Sophia. Can't wait to continue next time.
Jacob, let's talk about some common mistakes English learners make and how to avoid them. What do you think is the most frequent mistake?
One big mistake is confusing verb tenses, especially when to use past simple versus present perfect.
That's true. For example, saying, I have went, instead of, I have gone, or, I went.
Exactly. It takes time to get comfortable with those subtle differences.
What's a good way to practice tenses without feeling overwhelmed?
I suggest focusing on one tense at a time and practicing it with real-life examples. Also, using timelines can help visualize when actions happened.
Great tip. Another common issue is prepositions. They can be tricky.
Yes, like in the morning versus at night or on Monday. They don't always translate directly from other languages.
Practice and exposure are key to mastering prepositions.
Definitely. Reading a lot and noting prepositions in context helps a lot.
What about pronunciation mistakes learners often make?
Mispronouncing vowel sounds is common, especially for sounds that don't exist in their native language.
How can learners improve their vowel sounds?
Listening carefully and repeating after native speakers. Also, using phonetic charts and videos demonstrating mouth movements.
Another challenge is articles when to use a, hen, or the.
That confuses many learners. Articles depend on whether the noun is specific or general.
Like, I saw a dog versus, I saw the dog.
Exactly. Practice and examples in context are important.
How about sentence structure? Are there common errors there?
Yes, like placing adjectives after nouns instead of before, for example, saying car red instead of red car.
Also, word order in questions can be tricky.
Right? Learners often say, you are coming, instead of, are you coming?
Speaking practice and listening to native questions helps internalize correct order.
Another tip is to think in English rather than translating from your native language word for word.
That's a big step towards fluency.
Indeed, it takes practice but makes communication more natural.
Now, let's discuss how learners can stay consistent with their English practice.
Creating a daily routine is crucial. Even 15-30 minutes daily beats long sessions once a week.
Setting specific goals, like learning 5 new words a day or listening to a podcast episode, can keep motivation high.
Using reminders or calendar alerts helps maintain habits.
Joining online language challenges or groups also adds fun and accountability.
Tracking progress visually, like with charts or journals, can motivate learners by showing improvement.
And don't forget to celebrate milestones, big or small.
Rewarding yourself boosts positivity and keeps you going.
As we explore more, what role do you think music plays in language learning?
Music is fantastic. It improves listening, vocabulary, and pronunciation.
Plus, songs are catchy and make learning enjoyable.
Singing along helps with intonation and rhythm.
Do you have favorite English songs that help learners?
Yes, simple and clear songs like Let It Be by the Beatles or Count on Me by Bruno Mars.
Songs with storytelling or repeated phrases are great for memorization.
Absolutely. And watching music videos adds visual context.
Lastly, let's talk about overcoming fear or embarrassment when speaking English.
That's a common barrier. I tell learners it's okay to make mistakes. They're part of learning.
Practicing with patient friends or tutors builds confidence.
Also, focusing on communication rather than perfection eases pressure.
Breathing exercises or positive self-talk can calm nerves before speaking.
Joining conversation clubs or language cafes creates safe spaces for practice.
The more you speak, the more natural it becomes.
Exactly. Every conversation is a step forward.
This has been an enriching discussion, Jacob. Thank you for sharing so much valuable advice.
Thank you, Sophia. It's been a pleasure. Looking forward to continuing this journey with our listeners.
Jacob, before we move on, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the best ways to practice English in daily life, especially for busy people.
That's a great question, Sophia. For busy people, it's about making English a natural part of daily routines. For example, you can listen to English podcasts or audiobooks while commuting or doing chores.
That's smart, turning downtime into learning time.
Exactly. Also, labeling household items with their English names can help reinforce vocabulary.
I like that. What about quick speaking practice?
Talking to yourself in English about your plans or what you did during the day works well. It doesn't require another person and builds fluency.
That's a good way to build confidence too.
Using language exchange apps during short breaks can also fit into a busy schedule.
And reading short articles or news headlines in English.
Perfect for quick reading practice and staying informed.
Now, what about people who feel stuck at an intermediate level? How can they break through to advanced?
For intermediate learners, immersing themselves more deeply helps, like reading novels, watching movies without subtitles, and engaging in longer conversations.
Pushing comfort zones to encounter more complex language.
Yes, and trying writing essays or blogs in English to develop advanced skills.
Feedback is important there, right?
Definitely. Finding teachers or peers who can correct and explain mistakes is invaluable.
How about preparing for English exams like IELTS or TOEFL?
Practice tests familiarize you with the format. Also, focusing on weak areas and using official prep materials helps.
Time management during the exam is critical too.
Absolutely. Learning strategies like skimming and scanning improves reading speed.
We could do a future episode focused solely on exam preparation.
I'd love that.
To close this segment, what advice would you give to someone just starting their English journey?
Be patient and persistent. Learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. Celebrate small victories and keep your curiosity alive.
Such wise words. And remember, our listeners, every step forward counts.
Exactly. and enjoy the process. That's the best way to learn.
Thank you again, Jacob. This has been a fantastic conversation, filled with practical tips and encouragement.
Thank you, Sophia. It's been an honor. I look forward to chatting more soon.
Jacob, before we wrap up this segment, can we dive a bit deeper into using technology to learn English? What apps or tools do you recommend for learners at different levels?
Absolutely, Sophia. For beginners, apps like Duolingo or Memrise are great because they focus on vocabulary and basic grammar with gamified lessons.
Those apps keep motivation high with rewards and short daily challenges.
Exactly. For intermediate learners, I suggest apps like HelloTalk or Tandem where they can chat with native speakers and practice real conversations.
So, it's about connecting and communicating in a natural way.
Yes, and for advanced learners, apps like Grammarly help improve writing by correcting grammar and style, while watching TED Talks or using platforms like Coursera can expose learners to academic English.
That's a good progression from basic to advanced tools.
And don't forget YouTube channels like The English Hour. Listening to podcasts or watching videos on varied topics helps with comprehension and pronunciation.
It's amazing how technology brings so many resources right to our fingertips.
The key is consistency and using these tools actively, not passively.
Great point. Now, how about incorporating English into hobbies? Can you give examples?
Sure. For example, if you love cooking, watch cooking shows or read recipes in English. If you enjoy sports, follow English sports channels or podcasts.
That way, learning feels fun and connected to your interests.
Exactly. It's easier to stay engaged when you're passionate about the topic.
What about reading books? Any recommendations for different levels?
For beginners, graded readers are perfect books written with simple vocabulary. For intermediates, try young adult novels like Harry Potter or The Hunger Games.
And for advanced learners,
Classic literature like works by Jane Austen or contemporary novels by authors like Khaled Hosseini.
books with rich language and deeper themes.
Yes. And it's helpful to keep a notebook to jot down new words and phrases while reading.
Excellent advice. Finally, Jacob, let's talk about cultural understanding. How important is it when learning English?
It's very important. Language and culture are intertwined. Understanding cultural context helps you use language appropriately.
Like knowing when to use formal or informal language.
Exactly. Also, idioms, jokes, and expressions make more sense when you understand culture.
That's true. Watching movies or TV shows from English-speaking countries can help with cultural insights.
Definitely. And engaging with native speakers offers the richest experience.
This has been incredibly insightful, Jacob. Thank you for sharing your wisdom on all these aspects of English learning.
Thank you, Sophia. I hope our listeners find these tips helpful and keep striving towards their goals.
And to everyone listening, remember learning English is a journey full of discovery. Keep practicing, stay curious, and enjoy every step.
Sophia, before we continue, I want to highlight something many learners overlook: the importance of mindset when learning a new language.
That's so true, Jacob. A positive and growth-oriented mindset can make a huge difference.
Exactly. Sometimes learners get discouraged by mistakes or slow progress. But viewing mistakes as learning opportunities is crucial.
I love that perspective. It's about embracing challenges rather than fearing them.
Right. Also, setting realistic, achievable goals helps maintain motivation.
Like learning 5 new words a day, or practicing speaking for 10 minutes daily.
Yes, those small, consistent goals add up over time.
And rewarding yourself when you hit milestones keeps the journey enjoyable.
Absolutely. Self-compassion and patience are key.
Speaking of patience, how do you advise learners to handle plateaus, where progress feels stagnant?
Plateaus are normal. When you hit one, try changing your learning methods, like focusing more on speaking if you've been reading a lot.
Mixing up techniques to re-engage your brain.
Also, revisiting old material with fresh eyes can reveal new insights.
That's a great tip. So, persistence, adaptability, and a positive mindset are the foundation.
Yes, and building a support system, friends, teachers, or language partners also helps.
Support really makes a difference in motivation and accountability.
Definitely. Sharing progress and struggles keeps you connected and inspired.
Before we move on, can we touch on how cultural differences impact communication in English?
Sure, different cultures have varying norms for politeness, directness, and body language, which affect communication style,
For example, some cultures prefer very formal language, while others are casual.
right? Understanding these nuances helps avoid misunderstandings and builds better relationships.
So, learning English also means learning to navigate intercultural communication.
Exactly. It's a skill that's valuable beyond just language proficiency.
This is such a rich conversation, Jacob. Thanks for sharing these deeper insights.
My pleasure, Sophia. I'm glad to discuss these important aspects.
Let's keep exploring ways our listeners can deepen their English learning journey.
Sophia, another important aspect is practicing pronunciation. Many learners struggle with sounds that don't exist in their native language.
Yes, and that can affect how well others understand them, even if their vocabulary and grammar are strong.
Exactly. One effective method is shadowing listening to a native speaker and repeating immediately after them.
That sounds challenging, but very useful for improving rhythm and intonation.
It is, but it trains your mouth muscles and ear simultaneously.
What about focusing on individual sounds, like difficult vowels or consonants?
Using minimal pairs words that differ by one sound like ship and sheep can help learners hear and practice distinctions.
That's a clever way to sharpen listening and speaking skills.
And recording yourself speaking can reveal areas to improve.
Many people don't realize how different they sound compared to native speakers until they listen to a recording.
Yes, and with apps and online tools, getting feedback has never been easier.
Let's talk about stress and intonation in sentences. How important are they?
Very important. They convey meaning and emotion beyond words.
Like asking a question versus making a statement, just by rising or falling intonation.
Exactly. Mastering these helps learners sound more natural.
Do you have tips for practicing that?
Listening to podcasts or watching movies and repeating sentences with the same tone works well.
And focusing on the musicality of English can make speaking more engaging.
Definitely. It's not just what you say, but how you say it.
Such a valuable part of communication. Any final thoughts on pronunciation practice?
Be patient, practice regularly, and don't be afraid to exaggerate sounds during practice to train your mouth.
Thanks, Jacob. Pronunciation is definitely a skill that requires time but pays off hugely.
Absolutely, Sophia. And our listeners, keep at it. Every effort brings you closer to fluency.
Jacob, shifting gears a bit. Let's talk about building vocabulary. What's your approach to learning and retaining new words effectively?
Great question, Sophia. For me, context is key. Learning words through sentences or stories helps remember meaning better than isolated lists.
So, rather than memorizing random words, connect them to situations or themes.
Exactly. Also, using new words actively in speaking or writing strengthens retention.
That makes sense. Passive recognition is one thing, but active use really cements learning.
Yes, and tools like flashcards with example sentences can help.
What about learning collocations or phrases, rather than single words?
Very important. Knowing that we say, make a decision, instead of do a decision, improves fluency and sounds natural.
So focusing on common word partnerships boosts your English instantly.
Exactly. And reading extensively exposes learners to these patterns naturally.
I often recommend learners keep a vocabulary notebook. Does that help?
Definitely. Writing down new words, their meanings, example sentences, and synonyms creates a personal dictionary.
And reviewing it regularly reinforces learning.
Yes, spaced repetition systems are excellent for this, where you review words at increasing intervals.
That technique leverages how our brain forgets to optimize memory.
Exactly. And don't shy away from learning idioms and phrasal verbs, they add color to your language.
True, but they can be tricky since their meaning isn't always literal.
Right, so context and practice are essential.
Any tips on how to deal with forgetting words or mixing them up?
Don't get discouraged. Revisiting and using words multiple times over weeks helps move them from short-term to long-term memory.
So, patience and repetition are again key.
Yes, and enjoy the process of discovery. Learning vocabulary is like unlocking new doors.
I love that image. It makes vocabulary building feel exciting and rewarding.
It really is, Sophia. And remember, it's a lifelong journey.
Perfectly said, Jacob. Now, let's talk about listening skills next.
Listening is definitely one of the most challenging skills for English learners.
Absolutely. The speed of native speakers and different accents can be overwhelming at first.
Yes, but exposure is the key. The more you listen, the better you become at catching words and phrases.
What types of listening materials do you recommend?
Start with simpler content like children's stories or beginner podcasts, then gradually move to movies, news, and advanced podcasts.
So, building up difficulty bit by bit.
Exactly. Also, active listening helps. Don't just hear, but try to understand and predict what comes next.
I find subtitles can be a great tool too, especially in the beginning.
They are, but try to use them sparingly over time to avoid dependency.
What about practicing with different accents? British, American, Australian, and so on.
Exposure to various accents is very beneficial. It trains your ear to understand diverse English speakers.
That's true. English is global, so understanding multiple accents is essential.
Definitely. Another tip is to listen multiple times to the same content. The first time for general understanding, then again for details.
That deepens comprehension and vocabulary too.
Yes, and don't hesitate to pause and replay parts to catch tricky phrases.
Some learners feel frustrated with slow progress in listening. Any advice?
Patience and consistent practice. Also, mixing listening with speaking and reading creates a balanced approach.
How about using transcripts or subtitles to check comprehension after listening?
Very helpful. Reading along with audio reinforces understanding and pronunciation.
So, a mix of active and passive listening methods is best.
Exactly, Sophia. And remember, real-life conversations are the best practice.
That can be intimidating though.
Yes, but starting with language partners or tutors in a friendly environment builds confidence.
Great tips, Jacob. Listening well really opens up opportunities to communicate better.
Absolutely. The more you listen, the more natural your English becomes.
Jacob, let's explore speaking skills now. Many learners say speaking is the hardest part. What's your advice?
Speaking can be intimidating because it's active and requires quick thinking, but practice and preparation help.
How can learners practice speaking if they don't have many opportunities to talk to native speakers?
Technology is great for this: language exchange apps, online tutors, or even recording yourself speaking.
Recording yourself sounds a bit scary, but very effective.
It's a way to catch mistakes and track progress over time.
What about thinking in English instead of translating from your native language?
That's a crucial step. Thinking directly in English reduces hesitation and speeds up speaking.
How do you recommend learners start thinking in English?
Start small, describe your daily routine, objects around you, or your plans in English in your mind.
Like internal dialogue practice.
Exactly. Also, practicing common phrases or responses makes real conversations easier.
Do you think shadowing helps speaking skills as well?
Absolutely. Shadowing improves fluency, pronunciation, and rhythm.
How important is vocabulary and grammar accuracy versus fluency when speaking?
Both are important, but early on, fluency and communication should be prioritized. Accuracy improves naturally with practice.
So, don't be afraid to make mistakes while speaking.
Definitely. Mistakes are a natural part of learning and valuable for improvement.
Any tips for overcoming nervousness or fear of speaking?
Practice regularly, start with familiar topics, and remember that most people appreciate your effort to communicate.
That's encouraging. Building confidence is essential.
Yes, and joining clubs, conversation groups, or online forums can provide supportive speaking practice.
What about using tongue twisters or pronunciation exercises?
They're great for articulation and muscle memory.
This is such a rich topic, Jacob. Thanks for sharing these insights on speaking skills.
My pleasure, Sophia. Helping learners feel confident to speak is so rewarding.
Jacob, thank you so much for sharing such valuable tips on speaking skills. It really gives our listeners practical ways to improve.
You're welcome, Sophia. Remember, consistent effort and a positive mindset make all the difference.
Absolutely. And to all our listeners, don't be afraid to practice every day, make mistakes, and keep pushing forward.
Yes, every small step counts towards your English fluency journey.
Thank you, Jacob, for joining me today and for this in-depth, insightful conversation.
Thank you, Sophia. It was great to be here and talk about all these important skills.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of the English Hour. Keep practicing, stay motivated, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Goodbye, everyone. Keep speaking, listening, reading, and writing. You're doing great.
Take care and happy learning.